Whoop whoop team, how are we all doing? Today's subject is something that we don't talk about, a bit like the mental health video did the other week. Today's video is actually going to be about money.
Show me the money.
No, show you the money.
Not show you! Show me the money!
Show me the money.
Yeah! Louder!
Show me the money.
That's it, brother, but you got to yell that shit!
Show me the money.
I need to feel you, Jerry!
Show me the money.
Jerry, you better yell!
Show me the money.
Your personal wealth, your income, and what you do with the money once you've earned it. Because people perceive others as having more money than they actually do is something that I've learned. And people always assume the next person has more money than them. And if someone drives a nice car, they assume they've got life sorted. It's bollocks. That's what I've learned. It's bollocks. And your long-term success or management of your own wealth can actually impact your physical and mental well-being, which is something I've talked about in so many videos. Living beyond your means causes you more stress than you can ever imagine. So before we dive into the video today, as I say, not for me to preach about how you should all live your lives. These are just questions I've been asked. I suppose not just since doing the channel, generally people see you opening businesses and doing things, invariably they're going to ask about money. So I thought I'd talk about money in the context of what I understand and know, which is my own money and my own situations and how I've made my decisions. So as I say, it's not for me to tell you all what to do. This is just what I've done, and if some of it can be useful, awesome. Please like, please subscribe, please share. It really does help the channel. As I said, when I started it out, this was never maybe what I thought it was going to become, but I'm super pumped that it has. I'm really delighted at the kind of feedback and the kind of viewings that we're getting for such early days. So thank you guys. I just want to say I really am super grateful. Right, dive in, talk about the monies. But actually, what I thought I'd do is talk about the 5 most salient things that affect most people's lives and their kind of financial welfare as they move on in life, because we don't talk about money, but we should. Just like we should talk about things like our mental well-being, because sadly money does make the world go round, and sadly many people make many poor choices with their money that facilitates long-term stress and difficulty for their lives with money. So as I said, it's not for me to preach and tell you how to live your life, but I've been asked quite a few times about what did I do with my money, how have I lived, how have I got what I've got. And I'm speaking from the point of view of someone that's not particularly materialistic. I'd say this from the point of view that I made a choice from the beginning of my career to manage my money in a way that allowed me to live the life I wanted to. And when
my mind's telling me no, but my body's telling me yeah.
And when I say the life I wanted to, that meant going into new ventures, leaving jobs, even if I didn't have one to go to, because I was chasing the next thing. And what I didn't want was the noose of a bunch of monthly payments around my neck that meant if I wasn't employed this week, this month or next month, I was going into the financial abyss. So as I make this statement, I'm aware this is absolutely not the case for everybody, but I'll caveat that by saying I worked unbelievably hard to create the situation for myself to make this statement. I wanted to get to the point where if I became unemployed for 12 to 18 months, I could pay my bills. Maybe because my career started pretty much during the 2008 recession, which is a weird time to start your career. But every 8-12 years, there is some kind of economic downturn of seismic ability, or not so much, but there's always a downturn. So I lived my life in every 10 years I've got to be prepared to weather a storm that I don't know how long it's going to be. There was a recession in the 80s, there was a recession in the early 90s, 2001, 9/11 happened, and that actually had not just social effects, it had economic effects. Then there was the absolute monster crash in 2008, and we sit here in 2020 not knowing what's about to happen, but absolutely certain that COVID is going to lead to probably one of the biggest recessions of many generations, not just our generation. And so I do feel like I can say this, I set my life up in a way that was prepared for these moments, and I recognise how lucky we are that I can make that statement. So that's kind of the preamble or the pitch of why I thought I'd do this video, because a lot of people have asked me, and I suppose I should have thought that would come when you're doing videos about careers. With careers comes money, with opening businesses comes costs and money. What does it all mean? So I thought I'd do the kind of 5 kind of principles that I think are super key to sound financial wealth management of your own money. Number 1, cars. Big one, and it's one that so many people fall for. Don't fall in the trap of living monthly. I'm aware most people cannot go out and buy a car for cash. That's not what I'm saying. But if you know in your heart of heart the budget is a Fiesta, don't go buy a Mercedes. If you know that the budget's a Mercedes, don't go buy a Ferrari. That's what this is about, is we all know what our economic limits are. But so many times we go in the showrooms and we think, oh, do you know what, but it'd be great if I could have that. The moment the car door shuts, you will feel euphoria. You'll convince yourself that you made a great decision. But then the 4 years that follow, when you're struggling to keep up the finance repayments, or you can't go on holiday, or you're absolutely panic-stricken about whether you're going to make ends meet during crises like this, you've made it harder for yourself. And that short-term decision causes a lot of long-term pain. As I say, I make that comment as someone that's bought himself out of negative equity at an early point in my life, and it wasn't necessarily because I overshot it. I bought a second-hand BMW up from a Ford Focus. It wasn't even crazy money, but it was that, do you know what, after the first 4 or 5 months, I didn't love that car, and there was so much more I felt at that point I could have been doing with that money, because a car is a means of getting from A to B. The comfier it is, the better it is, fantastic, but there's so many more things in your life that can fulfill you. Don't fall into the trap of blowing your monthly money. Look at things on an annualised basis. How much is this actually costing you per year? Will that car derive that much joy for you? And it's a really weird thing to focus in on something as maybe insignificant as a car, but there isn't a single household that I know with families that doesn't drive. I'm well aware that not every household can afford a car, but don't go beyond your limits, because it's not about just what you spend in that month. How much does it cost to refuel? How much does it cost to insure? How much does it cost to tax it on the road? These are all the things that you don't necessarily consider when you purchase a car. And when it comes to your financial wealth, this one's such an easy win for yourself. If you don't blow your money on a car, maybe you can put it into something else, some money away for a rainy day. Point number 2, mortgages. As soon as we all get the kind of first big paycheck, people start looking at houses on Rightmove, purple bricks, whatever it might be.
My mind's telling me no, but my body's telling me yeah.
As I said earlier on in the video, I made the conscious decision, and my wife was kind enough to go with it, that we were able to get a mortgage for about 3-4 times what we bought a house for, but we didn't, because what that meant was I had the 12 to 18 months where if I didn't work I could afford to pay the mortgage. But not only that, as you've heard in all these other videos, I'd always wanted to go into business, and I'd had little investments here and there, and then over time I've taken these things more seriously. Unless you come into money or unless you start off wealthy, or unless your first ever gig gets you a ton of money, you're never really going to be in the position to actually facilitate your own success if you want to go your own way. The quickest way to achieve that is to not go out and buy a house that's beyond you. And when I say beyond you, the more rooms it has, the more it costs to heat, the more furniture you need. All these decisions have a knock-on effect, and these are the bits a bit like the car where people don't think about. You fall in love with what that represents. For me, my view was my happiness is not derived by the four walls that I live in. It's the people in it. It's the friends and family that come over, or the ones that live with me, that bring me my joy. Does a nicer house help? Of course it does. Does being in a better area help? Of course it helps. However, we can put the wrong value on the wrong items, because that photo on Facebook or Instagram or wherever it might be doesn't bring you long-term fulfillment when you've got to keep up with those mortgage payments. So as I said, it's not for me to preach and tell you all how to live your life, but based on the questions that I've been asked about managing your money, and particularly in a time like this, one of the big decisions I made was to buy a very affordable house, have it in a style that I like, that felt comfortable, but it then facilitated the freedom to make independent financial decisions. Number 3 is a really, really simple one. Deal in cash.
It's money for old rope, lovely jubbly.
Wherever possible. It's something that I've actually told loads of my mates. I fall into the trap. It's so easy now just to swipe the card, bing, 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 and you're spending money. It doesn't have a real tangible value when it's a card. It's like a game. You never really have the context of just how much money you've spent. So the kind of 2 practices I've always had are write down what you spent every day and check it against what's gone out at the end of the month. Have the context of what you've spent on what, because as you're watching this video, I would probably argue that 90% of you couldn't remember what you spent in the last couple of weeks. And when you get to the end of the month, you invariably have less money than you thought you were going to. Just check. Number 2 is, and in a world that's moving to more cashless, this is more difficult, but where you can, buy things in cash. Me and my wife used to take out a certain amount of cash at the start of the month. Be sensible, don't have loads of cash in the house. Obviously that's not what we do. We don't have hundreds of pounds flying around in the house. That's not smart. But take out a certain amount for the week that gets you through, because every time that £10 or £20 goes out of your wallet or your purse, you've got a very tangible marker of that money going. God, I spent 150 quid this week, I don't know what on. That'd be my biggest advice in terms of how you get the pennies down, because you suppose when it's on the card, I can worry about that at the end of the month. The end of the month comes, you've spent more. If you're in the luxurious position where what you spend on a monthly basis doesn't truly matter, more power to you. But most of us are not in that position. So write down what you spend each day, take the cash out. Diversify your income. This one's much more difficult. I'm not naive to the fact that I'm making a statement that's not that easy achieved. I say this as someone who's building a career of multiple incomes, and don't think they're all massive, far from it. Again, it's investing in my future, where they might literally be tens of pounds, some of these income streams, that then become hundreds and then become thousands. But if you can do, and what I mean by that is if you've got a full-time job, there's plenty of other things that you can do. I've got a friend who makes lights out of old used alcohol bottles. I've got another friend that used to sell baby clothes. They set up a little pop-up thing. I also have friends that invest in property, bring in rent. There's lots of little things that you can do. For me, property always felt like a safe thing, because even as the property market crashes, it invariably comes up again. And as long as you're not looking for a short-term gain, a long-term investment, it's twofold. Gives you the money for when you retire, or as you move towards retirement, and if you're lucky enough that you've paid off that mortgage during the rental period, it gives you a secondary income. But also, if times get hard, moments like the coronavirus, we don't know how long this is going to last, we don't know how tough this is going to be. And hopefully I'm not talking about the coronavirus for many, many months to come on these videos, but maybe we will. If you fall on hard times, yes, people aren't buying houses as readily as they were. You still have an asset. It might not be worth what it was at a point, but you can realise cash. Remember, cash is king. You can give yourself access to some money that you wouldn't otherwise have had. We all have savings accounts, but savings accounts can be quite idle these days. The percentages aren't great. I'm not a stocks and shares guy. I would never profess to be. I'd also not advise you to be. Not because I think they're bad, but smarter people than me invest in stocks and shares and don't do too great. There's smarter people than me that do brilliant out of it. But I think unless you can give yourself the time, because I do know more than probably what I'm alluding to, unless you're willing to put in the time, the energy, the research, and you need to work on this daily, you need to watch and manage your shares if you're going to do it properly and yourself. Don't take the risk. You can lose a lot of money very quickly. A share price that's good today can be bad tomorrow, and as we've seen in the current climate, many more company values have gone down rather than up. So up to you how you do it, but I'd always encourage you to diversify your income. My last piece of advice, slightly weird one, and it's not directly tangible, but every person watching this video, hopefully if you're still with me at this point, everyone will know it. Listen to that voice inside your head, that gut feeling. If you're about to spend some money and it makes you feel uncomfortable, don't let your heart override your head. Just because you convince yourself that you love it and you want it, it could be anything. A car, a holiday, a sofa, anything. It depends what your relative income is versus what you're relatively spending. If you convince yourself it might be more than what I budgeted, but I'll get the joy from it in the end, 9 times out of 10, that doesn't happen. There's always the once or twice out of 10 that it does. But think about all the money you've spent on the 8 or 9 times out of 10 that it didn't in order to achieve that. Having some money and buying material things does not bring you long-term joy. However, when it does bring you long-term joy is when you've bought something that you've wanted for a very long time, you've saved up for it, you've worked hard for it, and the moment you buy it, it's yours.
I don't believe it.
I don't believe it. Just down the side.
Have a look at what you could have won.
You own it. It gives you an unbelievable sense of satisfaction because you've not got to worry about the next 48 months worth of repayments on something. So if when you're signing up to buy something, if it's beyond you, unless you know for sure that you need it, listen to your head, don't bother. Because a lot more heartache will be brought on that decision than joy. And that's the 5 for me. They're the principles by which I've kind of lived my life. And as I said, it's not for me to tell anyone how to live theirs. You can listen to all this and think, what a load of shit, Andy. I'm going to carry on doing what I'm doing. Cool. Move on to the next video. But if there's little things, if that's that you do start writing down what you spent, if you do think twice about maybe that car or this or that, instead of it being brand new, it might be second hand. All these little decisions, particularly in climates like this, ready yourself for when times aren't as great. But I really strongly recommend that you all look at your financial planning in 10-year cycles. Look back at what I'm saying. Go back through the history of time. Every 8 to 12 years, as I said, there is some kind of economic downturn because things cannot just keep getting higher and higher and higher. They have to level and go again. Ultimately, yes, they get higher, but it needs to be at a steadier pace or there'll be an even bigger drop. Sadly, we're about to go through one of those moments economically, but don't think that the sun will always shine. Be hopeful, be positive, but be sensible when it comes to your own money. Do not live beyond your means, because I promise you, the moment you buy those things you want, whether it is the house, the car, whatever it might be, the moment you buy it and you can genuinely afford it, the satisfaction you will feel is beyond anything you can ever imagine, and it will not be achieved by buying stuff that you can't. So as I say, not meaning to preach, maybe it comes across as preachy, but it's a subject matter that, as I said, I probably should have recognised would have come up when people hear me talking about work and giving advice and things like that. It goes hand in hand, work, money. So that's how I've lived my life. As I said, not for me to tell you otherwise, but if you can put any of those practices into place, I promise you that you won't regret it. But it's not for me to say that. So it's over to you. But as always, thank you for watching. Really do appreciate it. Please like, please subscribe. But most of all, please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.